In this concept, we will be looking at pedigree analysis in humans, recessively and dominantly inherited disorders, multifactorial disorders, and genetic testing and counseling. Most traits in humans are caused by multiple genes, but there are a few that are caused by one gene. In lab, you will be looking at some of these traits. If you are recessive for a trait, you know your genotype. You are homologous recessive. If you are dominant for the trait, you have to look at your relatives to determine if you are homologous dominant or heterozygous dominant. For example, we can do a pedigree analysis on these two sisters and see where the sister without the widow's peak got her recessive alleles. She got them from both parents who were heterozygous. The sister with the widow's peak is more difficult. If one of her parents didn't have a widow's peak, we'd know she was heterozygous. Since both parents have widow's peaks, we have to look at the woman's children. If she has children without a widow's peak, both she and her husband are heterozygous, like her parents. Or her husband doesn't have a widow's peak. Either way. We use pedigree analysis to track inherited disorders while we are studying those disorders. Some disorders, like albinoism, is recessive. It only shows up when both parents have a recessive allele, and the two recessives allele combine in the affected individual. The disorder is maintained in the population through carriers of the recessive allele, or heterozygous individuals who don't display the affected phenotype. A few disorders are caused by a dominant allele, such as achondroplasia. By the way, this chart here and in the book are not politically correct. The correct term is little person, not dwarf. Anyway, achondroplasia, which affects the lengthening of the limbs, can arise through a mutation in the gametes of an unaffected parent, and the child will have the disorder. If you've watched the TV show, Little People, Big World, you know that two little people can have children with normal height. This would be a situation in which a little person married somebody who did not have achondroplasia, and which half of their children would not have the condition and half would. As I mentioned before, most human traits are multifactorial, and we are generally interested in multifactorial disorders because we are trying to help everyone have good health and quality of life. This list is a very small sample of the diseases that are multifactorial. And of course, there are environmental conditions. Even if you have the genes that predispose you to heart disease, if you exercise and eat right, you might not get it. Diabetes has been linked to some viral infections, so we may have vaccinations in the future, and so on. So if you know you have a disease in your family and in your spouse's family, a genetic counselor can look at your pedigree and use Mendelian genetics and probability rules to determine your chances of having an affected child. They can do DNA testing to identify if you are a carrier of the disorder or if you're a homozygous non-carrier. A fetus can be tested to see if they have the disorder. Newborns can also be screened so the parents can begin medical treatment immediately. Often this greatly increases the quality of life of the affected individual. Cystic fibrosis and sickle cell disorder are examples of this. Proper treatment helps folks with CF and sickle cell lead fairly healthy, full lives. Well, that's it for this concept. Just the wrap-up video left.